And welcome back to Fishing College. This is Rameyoutdoors, and today we're going to be talking about, do beginner anglers need specialized combos like the ones I'm currently holding? I mean, heck, this one, it's built out specifically to throw big swim baits. This one specifically built out to skip around docks. Do you, as a beginner angler, need these? No. No, you don't. And that's really something that I think a lot of other content creators and a lot of other anglers, when they're introducing people to any kind of fishing, they stop seeing the ability to see the forest for the trees or whatever the phrase is. And they go in at it from an enthusiast perspective or a tournament perspective. But when you look at things from a beginner standpoint, where money may not be something that you want to go all in on, or it may just be a knowledge thing, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Do you need 30, 40 different combos? Eventually, probably, sure. You know, it never hurts to have more fishing rods. But is that something that you need right off the bat? Is that something that you need for the first couple of years? Is that something you need for the first couple of months? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. For example, I have probably close to about 30 bait casting combos and about 7 or 8 spinning combos. If I told a beginner, hey, you need every single one of these, nobody would ever get into fishing. No, nobody ever. Sure, do they help being able to properly throw a technique? Absolutely. Now, does that mean that you can't throw a jerkbait on a 7-foot medium heavy? No, you can. You absolutely can. Is it going to be suboptimal? Yes. Now, let's talk about why some people have so many combos. And that is a very easy to answer question. There's really only a couple of reasons, maybe 2, maybe 3. The first one is going to be properly being able to throw different techniques. For example, like I used with that jerkbait analysis. Generally, whenever you're throwing a jerkbait, you want a 6'6" to 7-foot rod that's spinning and somewhere in that medium or medium light range, depending on the size and the depth that you're going to be working that jerkbait. Whereas if you're going to be working like a topwater frog, you want an absolute broomstick of a rod. Usually in that 7'4" to 7'8" range, medium heavy or heavy, and like a really high gear ratio reel. But do you need that as a bank angler? Absolutely not. You don't need all of those specialized combos unless you want them from an enthusiast perspective, or you want to be able to work those techniques properly. Another reason that these people have so many different rods is because in a tournament situation, there may be only a couple of seconds in which you have that range for that bite. So you might want to put down one rod and quickly pick up another that has something else tied on. And so that can be something really big. Like for example, if you're throwing a wacky worm, you might want to follow up with something that's a little bit different to be able to catch that fish. For example, like a jig or something like that. And sort of that last big piece is the fact that a lot of these anglers are going to be working on waters that are so incredibly pressured. For example, Red Crest this year took place on a lake that was so incredibly pressured, a lot of these anglers had to downsize significantly and they had to switch to techniques that weren't normally being thrown at this time of year. For example, we're in the post-spawn or spawning area. You have people that are going to be throwing wacky worms, that are going to be throwing Texas rigs, jigs, and jerkbaits. And as you're working more into that post-spawn, you're going to be throwing crankbaits, chatterbaits, flukes, jerkbaits, things like that, because you're dealing a lot with water temperatures that are moving upwards. They had to show a different presentation that these bass had not been seeing very often. During the winter or something like that, in Bassmaster, the Demiki rig and the jerkbait was thrown so heavily. And if you're trying to work these on just a do-all combo, they're not going to have the correct action and they're not going to have necessarily the correct speed and retrieval that might be enticing to these fish. So that's kind of why these tournament anglers are building out such specific combos for very specific baits. Now, basically everything that I just said makes it sound like, oh, I do need these combos. No, you really don't. And oftentimes, a lot of these anglers that are in these tournaments, they have money that's on the line. They have sponsorships, they have deals, they have expectations on the line. And oftentimes, a lot of these anglers, they've been collecting these rods, reels, through sponsorship and endorsement deals. So sometimes they may not have even paid for them. So that's kind of why a lot of these combos and like, these anglers that have 50, 60 rods out on their boat or even in their boat exist. The first real rod that you should be getting is a spinning rod. If you are brand new to fishing, just pick up a spinning rod. And I'm talking somewhere between 7 foot to 7'3", medium, moderate, or medium fast. And that is going to allow you to learn to work a lot of very finessey style baits. You can go for that 7 foot to 7'3" medium heavy, but that's going to kind of close off a couple of things like Ned rigs. That's going to kind of close off certain things like drop shots that don't need all that much movement. So that's why I'm saying that 7 foot medium, moderate, or medium fast is going to be a really big thing. And go for like a 2,000 to 3,000 size reel. You don't really need those 4,000 size reels unless you're going to be working wacky rigs in really heavy cover, stuff like that. And I would go usually around 12 to 15 pound fluorocarbon. And if you can't afford fluorocarbon, just go with monofilament. They're going to accomplish very similar things, and they're going to have very similar-ish results. Now, they are two completely different lines. So a lot of you really advanced anglers out there, I can already hear the comments. Did this guy just call monofilament and fluorocarbon the same thing? No, they're not. But in terms of for a beginner, they do accomplish a lot of the same things. And monofilament isn't a bad line. There are just better options out there. Next, once you're ready to actually work up to that bait caster, or if you already have a little bit of experience with one going forward, what I would go for is a 7 foot to 7'4" medium heavy fast. And then go from a 7.1 to 7.5 to 1 gear ratio with anywhere between 15 to 17 pound fluorocarbon or monofilament. And this is going to allow you to kind of cover in that all-encompass. You have something that can work these other rigs. Now, are you going to be able to throw magnum-sized glide baits on it? Absolutely not. That's why you need specialized rods, like the one that I've got here, that has a 300 size reel, an 8 foot extra heavy rod that is an absolute broomstick with 25 pound fluorocarbon on it, backed by 65 pound braid. And for the most part, that is going to allow you to throw almost every single common technique. It's going to allow you to throw chatterbaits. It's going to allow you to throw jigs. It's going to allow you to skip jigs. It's going to allow you to do basically everything that anyone might want to do when they are a bank angler and just getting into bass fishing. And it's going to allow you to experiment with a lot of different techniques. So ultimately, what it comes down to, these specialized combos, they're only going to be coming around for tournament anglers, for enthusiasts, and people with boats. Whenever I'm bank angling, I'm only going to be carrying maybe 2, maybe 3 combos with me. And, well, you can only really fish with one at a time. And what are going to be the things that I'm carrying with me? Well, first off, I'm going to be carrying a spinning rod with me, because that's going to allow me to throw Ned rigs, jerk baits. That's going to allow me to throw wacky rigs very easily, and a lot of these lighter rigs, and also drop shots whenever those are really needing to be used. That I'm going to be bringing with me is kind of a lighter bait caster, or kind of like a, I don't want to say a do-all, but like kind of a do-all for most baits. For example, like your crankbaits, your chatterbaits, things like that, where I'm not necessarily going to be throwing it in heavy cover, but I'm going to be throwing it in more that moderate or light cover or no cover at all. So usually that's going to be a 7.5 to 1 or slower, and that's going to be a 7'2" to 7'4" medium heavy moderate, or it could be a medium heavy fast. It just kind of depends on what conditions are and what temperatures are that day. And then if I'm going to be bringing in a heavier rod, if I'm bringing in that third rod, this is going to be kind of my broomstick. So, and what I mean for that is those heavier, I guess like heavier presentation, like jigs, and whenever I'm throwing like topwaters, like topwater frogs. And that is going to be that 7'4" to 7'6", medium heavy, or heavy, fast, extra fast. And usually that's going to have braid or really heavy fluorocarbon. That's whenever I'm going to be bank angling, or if I'm just wanting something out of like a little tiny John boat, just me and my brother or me and a friend. Sometimes that's all I bring whenever I'm out on a kayak, but that just kind of depends. Now, what if I'm boat angling? And this does kind of depend on the time of year. For example, I'm not going to bring the entire arsenal every single time. For example, during the summer, I'm not going to be throwing Alabama rigs. That's mostly a winter presentation. So usually speaking, I can just leave that at home. Now, what am I going to be doing a lot of? A lot of top waters, a lot of deep cranking, a lot of jigging, a lot of punching, a lot of swim baits, a lot of magnum swim baits, and a lot of shallow crankbaits. And I'm also going to be skipping a lot of docks. So that's where this combo comes into handy. It is a 7-foot broomstick on an 8.5-to-1 gear ratio reel. That is 55-pound braid. So whenever I'm skipping that dock, I have a good leverage point, and I have something that has a lot of torque and a lot of backing that I can yank that bass out of there. So even when I'm on a full-size boat, I still don't bring out the entire arsenal. I just look at what the weather is going to be that day and what techniques are typically going to be good for that time of year, and that's what I'm going to bring. But that's also whenever I'm going to be casually on a larger boat. Now, if I'm entered in a tournament, I'm probably going to be bringing out most, if not all, of my rods. And that is so that, say that something is working on the water that I, quite frankly, wouldn't expect. Say that water temperature dropped a ton because we had a massive cold front. Say that it's cloudy. Say that there's a little bit of chop in that water. Say there's a ton of bait fish, but it's the summer. I have the option to throw an Alabama rig if I want to. Now, does that mean that you can't throw an Alabama rig in the summer? You absolutely can. It's a fine bait. It works great. But if I'm going to be doing anything else, I'm probably not going to be bringing the entire arsenal out. For the record, yes, I do know that Alabama rigs are banned in a lot of tournaments. I'm just using that as an example. For you little keyboard warriors, start coming after me. Also, I think this is kind of worthy to talk about. A lot of these specialized combos can get really expensive. For example, and this isn't some kind of bragging video by any means, but this rod, it is an Okuma Guide Select Swimbait rod. I got it on sale for $160. And I think it was like 50% off. So that is an incredibly expensive rod already. And then you have a Shimano Corrado HGK. This is a 6.6-to-1 gear ratio, super torquey reel. And not to mention, it's incredibly comfortable. So, you know, looking at that 300 size reel, these big steel alloy cranking arms, this thing is a workhorse for any kind of large swim baits. And this is I think this is a 7.5, 8-inch wake bait. It's an XPS with a brush tail, and it is technically a top water swim bait, which is, they're a ton of fun to throw, especially during the summer and during the fall, whenever they're going to be hitting a lot more top water and kind of coming up and striking. But a lot of these specialized combos get really freaking expensive. So someone who's coming into angling and may not know a whole lot, or may not have a lot of money, that's not really something you want to be buying. And I hate to say it, not everyone needs it. Wow. Like, I know plenty of large tournament anglers that don't really throw swim baits during tournaments, which is really wild because swim baits are really effective for catching monster bass, especially during the post spawn, which can be insanely effective. But I really hope that helps. And as we kind of continue on with Fishing College, I know this is a bit more of a 100 level video. As I kind of talk a little bit more about how to work certain baits, or, you know, talk about certain techniques, I'm going to leave gear guides and stuff like that in the actual video. But as we get into those 200 and 300 level videos on this channel, I'm going to be leaving gear guides in the actual video, and I'm going to be talking about actual specific combos. So whenever I do an actual video on skipping a jig, I'm going to be talking about why you want to use a shallow spool, why you want like a really thick, heavy rod, why you want to do this, why you want to do that, which can be really, really important whenever you're actually building out a rod or building something out for a specific technique. I really hope this video helps, and if you guys have any ideas for any other videos you want to see on this channel, please let me know down in the comments. And as per usual, have fun catching fish, people. Peace.